She understands now, my mother said calmly as my father destroyed my dream. In that horrifying moment, I did understand. I understood that they had just handed me the perfect weapon I needed to burn their carefully constructed world to the very ground. My name is Audrey, and before I tell you how I built my life, I have to tell you how my own father tried to burn it to the ground. It happened on a humid Tuesday night in West Virginia, under the sickly yellow glow of our kitchen light. My father, Wayne, a man whose hands were permanently stained with the ghosts of coal dust, took a 10-pound sledgehammer to my future. He lifted it high, the steel head catching the light, and brought it down on my prototype, the final model for a tech startup I had poured 2 years of my soul into. The sound was a sickening crack of splintering acrylic and popping circuit boards. Shards of my dreams skittered across the linoleum floor. He wasn't just breaking a machine, he was trying to break me. He looked me dead in the eye, his own filled with a bitterness as deep as the mines he once worked, and said, "In this valley, your legacy is ash, just like mine. You don't get to fly higher." That moment was meant to be my end. The final lesson in a lifetime of being told to know my place. But some acts of destruction are so absolute, they become a strange kind of liberation. This isn't just one of those dramatic family revenge stories you hear about. It's a blueprint for escaping a life that was never meant to be yours. It's about realizing your cage is only as strong as you allow it to be. If you've ever felt trapped by the place you were born, by the people who were supposed to build you up but only ever tried to tear you down, then you've found the right channel. I just ask that you type the name of the city or town you're watching from in the comments. I want to see how far this story reaches, far beyond these mountains. Those mountains have a name. I grew up in Beckley, West Virginia, a town built on a foundation of coal and propped up by pride. It's the kind of place where high school football trophies from a decade ago are still the main topic of conversation at the local diner, and ambition is a dirty word, mistaken for arrogance. My father, Wayne, was the town's bitter poet laureate. His identity was so tied to the mines that when they started closing, a part of him closed down too. He wore his hardship like a badge of honor and saw my dreams not just as foolish, but as a personal insult to his suffering. Then there was my mother, Lorraine. On the surface, she was Appalachian sweetness personified, the queen of the church bake sale, the first to offer a casserole in times of trouble. But her kindness was a currency used to buy influence and enforce the town's unspoken rules. Her greatest rule was, don't make waves, and I was a tsunami. And my brother, Logan? He was the golden boy, the star quarterback whose glory days never really ended because he never left. He was their masterpiece, living proof that happiness was found right here within the county line. I, on the other hand, was the glitch in their perfectly curated family portrait, the girl with her nose in books, about coding and venture capital instead of a Bible. In our house, there were 2 paths, the one they paved for you and the one you were punished for wanting. Let me know in the comments, were you the disappointment or the golden child? Type dreamer if you were the one who always wanted more, or crown if you were the one they paraded around. I have a feeling I know which one many of you were. For the dreamers out there, you know it's never one big, dramatic explosion that defines your childhood. It's death by 1,000 cuts, a slow, systematic erosion of your spirit that's so subtle, you start to believe it's your own fault. The undermining in my family was an art form. In 10th grade, I won a state-level coding competition. When the local paper ran a small picture of me, my father, Wayne, glanced at it for a second before wrapping the day's fish guts in it. He didn't even say a word. The silence was his message. My mother, Lorraine, practiced a softer kind of sabotage. She'd forget to give me messages about scholarship information nights or summer tech camps. "Oh, honey, it must have slipped my mind," she'd say, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "Besides, you need to be here to help me with the church fundraiser." My earnings from my part-time job at the diner weren't mine. They went into a family jar that miraculously was always empty whenever I needed books, but was full whenever Logan needed new tires for his truck. He was their prince, and I was the court jester, there to be mocked. He'd bring his friends over while I was working on a project, peering over my shoulder and saying, "Look at little Audrey, trying to be the next Bill Gates. Ain't that cute?" Each incident was a single thread in a net they were weaving around me, designed to keep me small, to keep me grounded, to keep me theirs. They thought every cut was a lesson in humility, a reminder of my place, but they didn't realize they weren't clipping my wings. They were just giving me 1,000 reasons to build my own damn airplane and fly it far, far away from them. And that airplane had a name. Project Phoenix. It wasn't just a fantasy, it was a meticulously crafted business plan, hidden in password, protected folders on a cheap, secondhand laptop I bought with saved tips from the diner. My idea was born from the very world they accused me of abandoning. I was designing an e-commerce platform to connect Appalachian artisans, the brilliant woodworkers, quilters, and glassblowers hidden in the hills directly to a global market, cutting out the middlemen who paid them pennies on the dollar. It was a way to export the beauty of our culture, not escape it. I called it Phoenix because I knew, even then, that my life in that house would have to burn to the ground before I could truly be reborn. This project was my secret world. Every night, after my shift ended at 11 p.m., I wouldn't go home. I'd drive to the public library parking lot, huddled in my car, leeching their free Wi-Fi until the early hours of the morning, drafting code and refining my presentation. This wasn't just for a grade. It was for the state's annual Innovators Grant competition. The grand prize was a full-ride scholarship to Carnegie Mellon University and $50,000 in seed money. It wasn't just a dream. It was an escape hatch, a winning lottery ticket, a declaration of independence, all rolled into one. I know someone watching this right now has a secret dream, a project hidden away on their computer or in a notebook, waiting for the right moment. If that's you, you don't have to say what it is. Just type "it's time" in the comments as a promise to yourself. A promise that its time is coming. But the problem with secret promises, with dreams you nurture in the dark, is that they have a way of getting out. My mother, Lorraine, had a sixth sense for anything that threatened the family's status quo, and she didn't respect locked doors. One afternoon, I came home to find her sitting at the kitchen table, a printed draft of my business plan spread before her. I expected a storm, an explosion of anger. Instead, I got something far more dangerous. A smile. "Audrey, honey," she began, her voice smooth as butter. "Your father and I, we saw your project, and we were wrong about you. So wrong." For the first time in my life, I felt a crack in the wall of their disapproval. She said they wanted to help, to be real partners. To be taken seriously by those judges, you need to look serious, she explained. A brand new MacBook, professional software. Not that old junk you're using. Let us invest in you. Let us finally be the parents you deserve. It was everything I had ever wanted to hear. A week later, we were at the local credit union, signing papers for a $5,000 small business loan. I was so blinded by the hope of their approval that I barely registered the loan officer's overly familiar handshake with my father. The betrayal wasn't a single event. It was a slow, creeping poison. First, it was the new roof on our house. Then, a new set of tires for Logan's truck. When I finally confronted them with the bank statements, my father just shrugged. "It's a family investment, ain't it? The family needed a roof. You're part of the family." The trap had snapped shut. I wasn't just their daughter anymore. I was their debtor, legally tethered to the very people I was trying to escape. Being their debtor wasn't about money. It was about control. That $5,000 loan was a chain, and they yanked it every single day. The final month before the competition, my life became a pressure cooker. My father, Wayne, would now march into my workspace, not with quiet disapproval, but with the authority of a foreman. "Our investment needs the gutters cleaned," he'd declare, pointing a thumb towards the ceiling. "You can get back to your little screen when the real work is done." My time was no longer my own. It was a resource he felt entitled to manage. My mother, Lorraine, wielded her power with social grace. She began hosting impromptu family dinners 3 times a week, inviting relatives who would pinch my cheek and ask when I was going to settle down and find a nice boy. If I tried to stay in my room to work, she'd sigh loudly. "But Audrey, this is for you. We're celebrating all your hard work." The guilt was suffocating, a tool to pull me away from my focus. Logan's torment evolved from mockery to direct interference. He'd take my new MacBook, the one bought with my loan, to stream football games, returning it with greasy fingerprints and the battery drained just as I was about to start a multi-hour data simulation. Each interruption was calculated, each demand designed to break my rhythm and chip away at my resolve. The house, once just emotionally suffocating, now felt physically small, the walls closing in. They weren't just trying to make me fail anymore. They were enjoying the process, feeding on my stress like a drug. And as the final week before the competition began, I could feel something darker building, a final storm gathering on the horizon. The storm broke on the night before I was set to leave for the competition in Charleston. My mother, Lorraine, in her most masterful performance, called for a Peace Summit family dinner. "We just want to send you off with our blessing, honey," she'd said, her voice filled with a warmth that should have felt like a warning. The meal was tense, a silent battle waged with forks and knives. Afterwards, my father, prompted by a subtle nod from my mother, asked to see the final project. I laid out my prototype and the polished presentation on the kitchen table, my heart pounding with a foolish, final flicker of hope. He circled it like a shark. "This is just a toy," he said flatly. Logan snickered. "You really think this is your golden ticket?" My mother just watched, her hands folded primly. And in that moment, something inside me finally snapped. "It doesn't matter what you think," I said, my voice dangerously steady. "I believe in it. And tomorrow, I am leaving." That was my sin. Defiance. My father's eyes went cold. "Then you ain't taking anything with you." He walked out to the shed and returned with the 10-pound sledgehammer. Time slowed down. I saw the deliberate swing, heard the apocalyptic crack of plastic and metal, and watched 2 years of my life become glittering, useless debris. My mother didn't scream. She walked over, placed a hand on my father's trembling arm, and said softly, "Now, see, Wayne? That's enough." She understands now. She wasn't horrified. She was satisfied. This is the part of the story that's hardest to tell. The part where the people who are supposed to protect you become the monsters under your bed. If you know what that moment feels like, that final, sickening snap of trust, I'm not going to ask you to share it. Just type a single period in the comments. A full stop. To mark the end of an old story and the beginning of a new one. For a long time after they went to bed, I just sat there on the floor, surrounded by the shrapnel of my dream. The silence in the house was heavier than any of their yelling had ever been. There was nothing left to break. That's when I heard a floorboard creak in the hallway. I looked up, and my brother, Logan, was standing in the doorway. His usual quarterback swagger was gone. For the first time, he looked small, his shoulders slumped, unable to meet my eyes. He didn't say he was sorry. The men in my family don't know that word. Instead, he looked at the wreckage on the table, then back at me. "I've seen him angry my whole life," he whispered, his voice raspy. "But that was different. That wasn't anger. That was something else. Something ugly." It was the most honest thing I had ever heard him say. He walked over, not making a sound, and slid a set of keys across the floor. They were for his old, beat-up Ford pickup, the one he treasured more than anything. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled wad of cash. "It's all I got," he said. "About $300. The gas tank is full. Just go. Go now before he wakes up." I stared at him, then at the keys. He had spent his whole life being their enforcer, the one who kept me in line with a well-timed joke or a shove. But seeing that final, brutal act had shown him the truth of the system he upheld. I grabbed the one thing I could salvage from the wreckage, a tiny USB drive containing my backed-up presentation, and slipped out into the humid night. The roar of that old truck's engine felt like a betrayal to the sleeping street, but to me, it was the sound of my first real breath of freedom. The 3-hour drive to Charleston was a blur of cheap gas station coffee and sheer, raw adrenaline. I arrived at the convention center 10 minutes before my scheduled presentation, wearing the same clothes from the day before, my hair a mess, clutching my USB drive like it was my only child. I walked into a sea of pressed suits, confident smiles, and state-of-the-art presentation equipment. I was a ghost at a feast. When I got on stage, I didn't have a prototype to show, only the slides on the screen and the fire in my gut. I didn't just give a presentation, I bled for it. I told them about the artisans, the forgotten culture, the need. The judges said later that while other pitches were polished, mine had something they couldn't fake: an undeniable heart. When they called Project Phoenix as the winner, I almost didn't hear it. But as I walked to the podium to accept the giant check and the scholarship, everything became crystal clear. I looked directly into the live stream camera, knowing my whole town, my whole family, was watching. "Thank you," I began. "I want to thank my first investors, my parents, Wayne and Lorraine." I let that hang in the air for a second. They believed in me so much that they took out a fraudulent $5,000 loan in my name, and then last night, used a sledgehammer to destroy my work to try and stop me from being here today. A gasp went through the auditorium. So, the first act of Phoenix will be to pay back that loan. The second will be to hire a forensic accountant and press charges. That was the moment I took my power back. Not with a hammer, but with my voice. For everyone who has ever had to swallow their truth to keep the peace, I see you. If you're finally ready to speak your truth, even if it's just to yourself, type "my voice" in the comments. It's a declaration that you will not be silenced. The silence that followed my speech was deafening, but the fallout was loud, and it echoed all the way back to the hollows of West Virginia. My mother, Lorraine, who had built her entire identity on being the town's sweet as pie matriarch, became a pariah overnight. The Temian face dignity she valued more than anything was shattered. People she'd known for 30 years would cross the street to avoid her. The whispers in the grocery store aisle were more brutal than any sledgehammer. My father, Wayne, retreated into a shell of angry silence. The threat of a lawsuit from his own daughter was a public humiliation he couldn't bear. They became prisoners in the very home where they had tried to imprison me, their world shrinking down to the size of their living room. In stark contrast, my world began to open up. Carnegie Mellon didn't just give me a scholarship. They wrapped a community around me. My mentor, Dr. Evelyn Reed, helped me navigate the complexities of launching a real business. When the Phoenix app officially launched 6 months later, it wasn't just a win for me. It was a win for the 80-year-old quilter from Logan County who made her first sale to a buyer in London, for the young woodworker who could finally afford to quit his job at the gas station. And Logan? Unable to live under the shadow of what our parents had done, he finally left town. He sent me one last text before he disappeared. "You were right. Good luck." They had tried to shatter my future, but instead, they had only shattered their own present, leaving me to build mine from the pieces. A year passed. A year of late nights coding, of terrifying business decisions, of small victories that felt like tectonic shifts. Then, an invitation arrived in my email that felt like the closing of a circle. I was asked to be the keynote speaker at the Governor's Summit on Appalachian Entrepreneurship, held in Charleston. The irony was so thick I could taste it. I drove back on the same highway I had fled down a year earlier. This time, it wasn't in a borrowed, sputtering truck, but in a new car that I had bought with my own money. The mountains that once looked like the walls of a prison now just looked like mountains, beautiful and ancient, no longer holding any power over me. On my way to the hotel, I took a detour. I drove down the familiar, cracked pavement of my old street and paused in front of the house. It looked smaller than I remembered. The paint was peeling in new places, and the lawn was overgrown at the edges. A light was on in the living room, a faint, flickering blue. I imagined them in there, my father in his recliner, my mother with her needlepoint, the television their only companion. I braced myself for a wave of anger, for that familiar, hot sting of betrayal. I waited for the triumphant feeling of revenge to wash over me. But nothing came. There was only a quiet, hollow sadness, a pity for these two people who had been given a chance to have a daughter who soared, and chose instead to try and cage her, only to find themselves trapped in the cage instead. Their prison was never the valley. It was the bitterness they carried inside. I had escaped the house, but more importantly, I had finally escaped the mindset that built it. I put the car in drive and didn't look back. Driving away from that house, with the setting sun in my rearview mirror, I finally understood the true nature of revenge. The most potent form of revenge isn't loud or destructive. It's quiet and it's creative. It's not about tearing their world down. It's about building your own world so magnificent, so fulfilling that you no longer have the time or energy to look back at the rubble of theirs. My father was right about one thing. My legacy was born from ash, but it wasn't the ash of his defeated, bitter life. It was the ash of the phoenix, the remnants of the person I had to let burn away so I could be reborn. That is the lesson I want to leave you with. We cannot choose the family we are born into or the town that shapes our childhood. We cannot control the limitations others try to place on us. But we, and only we, have the absolute power to choose who we become. We choose the work we do, the love we accept, and the family we create for ourselves, a family connected not by blood, but by mutual respect and shared dreams. Your past does not have to be your prison unless you give it the key. Your worth is not determined by those who fail to see it. If this story resonated with you, if you believe in the power of building your own future from the wreckage of someone else's expectations, then subscribe and join this community. We're all building our own legacies here, one story at a time. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, sometimes the greatest gift toxic people can give you is a crystal clear picture of exactly who you never, ever want to become.